All right, welcome in, everybody, to a Tuesday edition, the first of 2024, here on Sports Daily. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor with you. Jad Chambers back in producing. We've got that KFH hotline open for you at 869-1240. We've got all kinds of fun stuff coming today. We've got Dan Israel, executive producer of the Chiefs Radio Network, coming up at the top of the next hour. Get into that Chiefs-Bengals game. We have a national championship now, as we will have Michigan and Washington squaring off, two teams that haven't had one since we've been in this new CFP format. We'll get into everything that happened yesterday with those games. A lot of fun things going on. Hope everybody's having a happy new year. Tommy, did you have your black-eyed peas yesterday?
You know, I didn't, and I'm disappointed in my New Year's Day, I'll be honest with you. I enjoyed watching the CFP, but, man, I couldn't stay up to watch the entire Sugar Bowl. I mean, it was late. And I caught up on it this morning, and I know that it was an epic ending to the game. I watched everything else, but then, man, I just, why are we starting a game so late on a night when we know that a lot of people have to go back to work? That's what I want to know.
Well, and the other silly thing is, too, we know historically how long these games are.
Yeah,
they add
exactly.
a billion commercials. So they already are long games. Yeah, there's no reason the first game couldn't have started at 3, right? And then 7 or whatever you needed to do. But you missed out. It was good. It was a great ending. Much better than the first
morning.
game.
I mean, I watched the final drive and all of that when I woke up this morning. I couldn't last.
It was a much better game than the first one. The first one was close at the end, but that game was sloppy. The second game was much more about, teams playing better and doing those things. Washington looked really good. Texas hung in there. Couldn't get it done at the end, but they had a chance. You said no black-eyed peas. What, are you insane? What's the deal there?
I don't really like them, and I don't. I mean, I've only had it maybe once or twice. It's never really been a tradition on New Year's Day for me. I know a lot of people do it. I've just never really been into it.
Do you hate good luck? I guess
I don't buy into that. I mean, I know you're a superstitious guy. I'm not. I don't really play into that. I make my own.
Did you have your black-eyed peas?
I don't even think I've ever heard of that before.
That's it. And that's the reason I asked. So black-eyed peas on New Year's is a very good luck tradition. And typically I just have a bag of dried ones in the cupboard, but that one had gotten 7 years old, and I just pop one like a pill. So we actually got a can of them. My wife grabbed a can of them, and so I was like, "That's fine. I can still pop that like a pill." But my kids loved them. They were just chowing down. I don't like them. No, I agree. They're okay, cooked into something. If you've got them with bacon and okra back home, and it's in some sort of something. But yeah, I don't like them that much either. But I got to have them on New Year's, so that's. But my kids loved them. They were like, "Well, can we chew them?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you can do whatever you want." And I just kept filling up their bowl. Man, they're gonna be the luckiest kids ever. Yeah, black-eyed peas on New Year's. You're welcome for 2025. You kind of missed the boat here.
Is that just a Texas thing? Because I have never heard of that.
Well, Tommy knew about it. So
I knew about it, but I don't partake in it. It's not anything that like I said, maybe once or twice. I don't know. I mean, I understand the good luck behind all of it, but at the same time, if it's not very good, why am I going to waste my time on it?
Southern tradition, Jed. Yes, Southern tradition. Okay. On a quick Google search. Yeah. So that's how that goes. That's just something I had to remind my parents. Almost forgot. I don't know what everybody's expecting in the new year. Well, Washington had theirs because they were able to hold on against Texas. I thought, they looked better. Michigan's it's going to be an interesting national championship game, kind of a collision of styles, right? The great defense versus the great offense. I'm not going to like the narrative too much today that we'll see that this is why we put Alabama in, and this is why we put them in over Florida State. It's such a game. It was not a good game. They didn't play well. They just kind of both slopped their way through to the end. That's not a good case. And I don't care that Florida State lost by 60 points. They weren't they were missing.
They didn't have anybody.
35% of their roster. Yeah. So I hate that, but I'm glad that Michigan got through because I didn't want Alabama to get through. And now I don't want Michigan to win because they're a bunch of cheaters. And so it's okay, let's Washington versus the world here. Let's go Washington. And it was always going to be that way for me. Whoever won between Texas and Washington is who I was going to pull for. So I'm glad that we've got a game now. I'm glad it's not Bama. Even if it is Michigan, at least it's something different. I do think, though, if the transfer portal, all of this stuff, like this is getting more competitive now. And I know TCU got smashed last year, but we're getting kind of different teams in a little bit, and it is getting more competitive. And I think the field is evening out. And you saw it yesterday. Like Texas has a transfer receiver from Georgia who made a big play in the game. Now we're going to see a big decision from Quinn Ewers. Does he come back to Texas? Does Texas want him back? And so he's like in a normal circumstance in the past, like he's kind of screwed here. But now he's no matter what happens, like he'll have a place to play. He can come back maybe if they decide they want him back, or if not, he can go somewhere else and he can be like that's a good thing, I think, for college football to spread that out a little bit. And we're seeing it begin to play out. When he goes to 12 teams, who knows? Like I cannot wait. Every time I watch these games, I'm just like, man, I can't wait for this thing to get expanded because these games are fun and they'll be fun. And yeah, Oregon might beat Liberty as if Liberty snuck in by 100, but who cares? At least they gave it a shot. But those were two good games. We were not disappointed in the CFP this year.
I've been on Washington for a long time. I mean, going all the way back to the regular season, I was on their bandwagon, and all Washington basically has been in their big time matchups this season is underdogs. They were underdogs when they played Oregon. They were underdogs. I believe they were underdogs in the Pac-12 championship game. They were underdogs against Texas. They're going to be underdogs against Michigan. So it hasn't really mattered. They've been, picked against and all of that. And all Michael Penix Jr. does is win football games. He's got incredible receivers. He can throw the deep ball, hooking up with those receivers in great fashion last night. I understand why Jaden Daniels won the Heisman. I totally get that. He had eye-popping stats, great quarterback. All of that is very, very true. But for a lot of people, last night in the CFP semifinals, that was the first time that they've been able to see Michael Penix Jr. play. That was really, the biggest national stage that he's been on, whereas LSU is in the SEC and everybody's going to watch them all the time. But, Michael Penix Jr., I think that there was a case to be made, and I think there continues to be a case to be made that he's the best quarterback in America. And the fact that he's going to be playing in a national championship game, he's the only one still standing from the Heisman finalists. Nobody's really talking about that. Nobody really pays attention to Washington. They're up in the corner of the country. They play a lot of their games late at night. They're a really, really, really good football team. Kalen DeBoer is a great football coach. I thought that he outcoached Steve Sarkisian last night. Not that Steve Sarkisian coached a bad game necessarily, but I thought that some of the play calls that Kalen DeBoer made were elite. And so I think that Washington, they're going to be, I think they are the early line. They're like 3.5 or 4 point underdogs right now to kick off the national championship game. They're going to be underdogs against Michigan. I get that. But man, like I've just been riding on Washington. Give me those points because that's all they do is win.
I've made a lot of money on Washington this year. I've taken them every time. When they played Oregon twice, like every time I just keep taking them because I like Penix too. I liked Texas in this game, but I like Washington in general terms. Now, I hope that, sometimes when you see the big-time offense go against big-time defense, we know how that goes. And Michigan's good. Like, Michigan's really, really good. They did not play well, but, relatively speaking, and still got it done against Alabama with some, late game heroics and all those things. But Michigan's really good, and they're experienced, and they're fantastic on defense. And Harbaugh's an incredible coach, so that's going to be tough. And I'll take Washington.
In all fairness, too, Bama probably should have forced double overtime. That final play that they called with Jalen Milroe was a bad snap. Awful.
It was
a bad snap, but it was a bad play call too.
Now, if you look at some of the different video, there's a lot of people pointing out that the play might have been there on a normal snap, the way that it was setting up, and there was a pre-snap thing happening with, I think it was a running back coming across, and he was going to have a good look, but they couldn't get him the ball because the snap was bad. I've seen lots of smart.
And how many bad
look
snaps
at
did Alabama have in that game? I mean, there were multiple.
There was one that he caught up over his shoulder. So I think it was poor execution. I think the design was probably fine and right, and it wasn't like a shoe in that he was going to get in, but you could see the opening there had the snap been better. But it was a game of mistakes. It's fitting that it ended on a mistake. It was like which team is going to make the last mistake, and it was Bama that did. And so that game, and that's the thing, like, just let's not pretend like this was some indictment on Florida State. And that's why, no, but either one of those teams played particularly well. And in the end, Michigan got it done. And probably they're going to play much better in this national championship game. That's what makes it hard to sort of predict, because you see Washington and they appear to play well. They made some mistakes too. I don't know what it was with catching punts yesterday, but none of the 4 teams could like do that.
The one thing that Michigan also did that I looked up and heard from a few different people about was that they really took that month off after they won the Big Ten into the semifinals, and they didn't really change up their offense, but they showed different looks. Their playbook was a little bit different. They lined up in kind of a different way. And I like that. I like the fact that Harbaugh did that in the month that they had to prepare for this game, because at that point, all Alabama has is what they've got on tape on Michigan. But if you go and you do something different in your game plan and you work on it in a month, then that can kind of catch the defense off guard. And that's kind of what happened, at least in the first half with Michigan. If you recall, Michigan got out to a lead and all of that. And, there was sloppiness and mistakes and all of that in the second half. But I really did like the different looks that Michigan gave that was different than what we've seen offensively from them throughout the regular season.
But, they're under the impression that the regular working model of college football is to have spies on enemy sidelines during the game. So you got to change things up, because who knows who was out there. That's how you get an advantage, right? That's what you're supposed to do in college football. They're there. It's amazing. Speaking of that Alabama like sort of took that mantle, and it's not that it made us forget about the scandal with Michigan, but it kind of did, right? Like all of a sudden we're all mad at Alabama, but the reality is like Michigan was caught red-handed cheating, like bad cheating. And their coach was suspended and all of these things. And like, we've sort of forgotten about that because Alabama got in over Florida State and we're all just mad at Alabama.
But Jim Harbaugh has done a phenomenal job in the last, month and a half or 2 months, ever since all of this broke, at really twisting the narrative to make Michigan the victim, like the Michigan versus the world. And, everybody's counting us out and kind of that whole thing. And I'm sitting back and I'm like, whoa, wait a second. Like, you guys were the ones that did the cheating. But all of a sudden, like, they've crafted this narrative that they're the victims. And it's a pretty smart PR move. I tip my cap to them because of everything with Alabama and the CFP. They were able to deflect that attention away from their scandal and put it on Alabama as the villain in all of this. It's kind of masterful.
He's kind of a weird dude too.
He is.
Like I would love to see him coach like Aaron Rodgers. Like, how does that go? Like, he just is like, every time they'd ask him a question in postgame, he would just like ignore them and say something else completely off the cuff. He's like so detached from anything else that's happening. And I think part of it's a defense mechanism because he's probably afraid somebody's going to ask him about his cheating. But like, it's so wild to me to watch this. I'm like, don't even ask him any questions. Like, it's a waste of time. Go, get somebody else. And listen, I think he's a great coach. I think he's going to do awesome whether he stays or goes to the NFL. He's never done anything but win. And I don't know, whether his direction was on the cheating or whether that was his assistants try. Who knows? I don't really care. They cheated. That's all that matters. But he's a good coach. And, watching Bama lose is never disappointing. But now I will be disappointed if Michigan wins the national championship. Let's go Washington. Let's, not leave any doubt about it. I'm with you on Penix. I'm the receiver, Roan Udunze or whatever, he is so good.
What did the Chiefs have to do to get him in the draft? I mean, he was incredible.
I don't know. Everybody's going to want him. He'll be the second receiver taken, but there are some people that think he should be the first. I mean, he had another good game last night. He's really good. There's a couple of really good ones in this draft, and we'll see. But it should be a good national championship game, and that's all we can ask for. And at least we get that in this final year of the 4-team, because once we get to 12 teams, we will be all in on this. Like, all of us will watch this more, I predict. I think we're seeing the talent spread around in college football in a sense that this thing's going to be really competitive as we get to 12 teams. It's going to be a lot of fun, and we're going to see better regular season matchups probably because of it, because teams won't be so scared to play them. Like, everything about it will be better.
Did you get a chance to catch up on any of what Harbaugh said during media day leading up to the game? Did you follow any of that? mean, we were talking about how kind of awkward and kind of a weird guy he is. This comes from Brett McMurphy. We all know, college football insider. So Harbaugh was asked a religious question at media day, which I think what's happening now is that these reporters know how weird of a guy he is, right? And some of the things that he says. So they just ask him off the wall questions sometimes just to kind of figure out what the answer is going to be. It's kind of, it's not unlike Mike Leach, I think, to an extent. Mike Leach is going to give weird answers, when he was coaching and all of that. So this was the answer that Harbaugh had to the religious question at media day. I have a feeling that if Jesus were to come back now in this era, I suppose that many of the biblical analogies he'd use would be about sports as well as agriculture, maybe a combination of the two. Solomon would have been a great coach too. I have that feeling. Jesus would have been a 5-star. He would have been a 5-star player, no doubt about it. He would have been a Hall of Fame coach. That was at media day, Jim Harbaugh, according to Brett McMurphy. Pretty incredible.
Yeah, I just sometimes you just don't understand the way those brains tick. Mike Leach was just like thoughtful in his answers.
Yeah.
Like you couldn't ask him a generic question because he wouldn't give you a generic answer. Sometimes I don't think Jim Harbaugh is listening to what's being said. Like when, he's looking at you, but he's not hearing the words that are coming out of your mouth because his brain is doing 10 other things. It must be. Like he must be thinking about, the opening sequence of the national championship game as he's asked about, what his thought process was on 4th down late in the game. Because I think that's what it was. And he just totally ignored that question. And he was Reese Davis so then the next play, you asked the player the same question. Like, what? Oh, okay. All right. Well, let's bring somebody else up here. It's just like, what an interesting storyline.
Can you imagine, by the way,
year.
if Jim wins the national championship and John wins the Super Bowl this year?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously the betting odds on favorite for that to happen and has been for a while. They're both such good coaches. They're so different, in their personalities, but they're just great coaches. And for Jim, he's done it at every level, at the highest level, and they're going to throw bags and bags of money at him. But I just think he wants to be in the pros, and we'll see what happens. If he can, if he gets Michigan a national championship and gets that monkey off that university's back, it almost makes it more likely, I think, that he's like, all right, I did my due diligence. I'm a Michigan man. I got it done. I'm out. You guys, good luck in the future. I've got everything set up. I'm going to go back to what I enjoy. All right, let's take a quick break. What'd you think of that national championship game? We'll go to the KFH hotline at 869-1240. You can get it there. We'll give away some HTO a little bit later in the show. We'll have Dan Israel coming up top of the next hour. But let's get into the Chiefs a little bit. We've also got a KU Wichita State game that happened. I know it happened a little while ago, but we haven't had a chance to talk about it. So we'll hit on a lot of different things today. First show of 2024. Happy New Year, everybody. Sports Daily coming right back. All right, welcome back, everybody. Sports Daily. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor. Glad to be here with you on the first show of 2024, not the first day of 2024. Chad Chambers producing. KFH hotline is open at 869-1240. I'll have a little giveaway for you a little bit later. Dan Israel will join us a little bit later to talk about the Chiefs. Let's talk about the Chiefs, Tommy. It was an interesting game. Cincinnati, I don't want to like overstate the win because Cincinnati, doesn't have Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase is hurt and T. Higgins was hurt in the game, but they've been playing pretty well. I don't think it was, the best game by the Chiefs by any means. However, I do think it provided the formula for them to win playoff games, of which I think they still can, against anybody if they play their game, in a really good way, which is not make mistakes, which they did make a few, right? They're going to have to play clean. Like if they play Baltimore in Baltimore, they're going to have a clean game offensively and play the best kind of defense they can play. That's what it will take. They didn't get that against Cincinnati, But stylistically, I thought they got what they needed. They really leaned on the run. It allowed some wide open wide receivers that didn't always catch the ball, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, but he was open, right, in some big spots. Rashee Rice was the guy I don't know. There's not much else Mahomes can do here. Like you can't do much else than hit your receiver in the hands. And at some point, you just have to, as observers, you just have to throw your hands up in the air and say, what else are they supposed to do besides hit the wide open receiver in the hands, right? There's nothing else they can do at that point. But I think that's probably going to be the end of MVS. I think we'll see somebody else just step into that role. I just don't think they can do that anymore. And Rashee Rice is really good. Kelsey probably needs to rest a little bit this week, I think. But that was the formula, Tommy, for them to be as successful as they're ultimately going to be in the postseason. They just, when they get there, they can't have guys drop the passes. They can't have strip sack fumbles, that kind of thing.
Yeah, they have one path to have success in the postseason. It's what you just mentioned. It's run the crap out of the football, and it's play stifling defense. That's basically it. Really, anything else, if they go off of that script, it's not going to work for them. That's the difference, I think, between Kansas City and some of these other teams that we've looked at as, the favorites to maybe win a championship, is that they can do it in a couple of different ways. The Chiefs have one way to get it done: run the football with Pacheco and play great defense. If one of those things doesn't work, or if they try to get off of that, it's not going to work out well for them, and they're going to lose in the playoffs pretty quickly. As far as your comment about Marquez Valdez-Scantling, I totally agree with you. I can't imagine that, I guess I can imagine that he'll be back on the field. I mean, throughout the entire season, he's had all these mistakes, but he finds his way back on the field, getting targets, getting snaps, dropping passes. He had the one really egregious drop. Then he had another really deep ball that went right through his hands that would have been incredible. He just can't catch the ball. And that's one of the worst contract signings, I think, that Brett Veach has had in Kansas City, is signing MVS to that contract, because it's guaranteed money and he's making a lot more than really any other receiver is on the team. And on top of that, and I'm sure that Dan Israel will talk about it next hour, there's no accountability from MVS. He just doesn't take any kind of responsibility. If you watched his body language after he dropped that pass, he looked right back at Patrick Mahomes like, hey, you didn't throw it where I wanted you to throw it. It's like, well, what more can he do? He hit you. It might have been slightly behind you, but you're a professional football player. Catch the football. You're wide open. How do you drop that? And so the body language is all there, and they can defend him publicly and on TV and interviews and all of that. But all it takes is to just kind of see the way that things are looking on the sideline. The guy is done.
Yeah, look, he was clearly frustrated with everything when he kind of made the motion of like, put it on my front shoulder, not my back shoulder. I get that. I don't know. I have no idea what he's like, in the locker room, on the sideline. I don't know.
But he hasn't taken any accountability in interviews. I mean, publicly, and we've heard it from other players. I've got to be better. Yeah, that's on me. Whatever.
I don't know enough about his personality. I would have to defer to his teammates on that. Like, is he a good teammate still? I would suspect that the answer to that is yes. He's as frustrated as everybody else, and like, they have the yips. These receivers have the yips. They cannot get through it. They signed Marquez Valdez-Scantling to give them a deep threat when they lost Tyreek Hill. The problem is, like, that's his component to everything, and he does get open. He just now can't catch the ball. Why do you think
he gets open, though? I mean, he doesn't have the coverage on him.
He got open in Green Bay too, but he had this issue in Green Bay also. Like, he was not, the Green Bay let him go for a reason. Like, he has the ability to get open, which is a big part of being a wide receiver in the NFL. But if you can't catch the ball, it doesn't do you any good. And so they don't, like, the Chiefs are in do or die mode right now. Like, if it's not working, I guess you got to throw. And maybe it's Justin Watson. I don't even know who it is. I don't know who the other one is, and maybe they don't need it. Maybe
probably Richie James. I think it's getting him on the field more, I would imagine. The options are limited.
But can he get open? Like, yeah. He's got his deficiencies too. I don't know who it is. It just, they have to have the threat of it, and then you take maybe a shot a game down there. And Watson had a big play like that. Yeah. So maybe Watson Maybe it's back to Watson now, who's also made his fair share of mistakes this year. But the good news for them is Rashee Rice is playing out of his mind. Travis Kelce is still trying to bust out of whatever defenses are doing to him. And they can, what's going to free up those receivers is Isaiah Pacheco. And you just cross your fingers and hope that Pacheco or they need two of them healthy, right? They don't have two of them healthy right now. And, P. Ryan filled in this week, but it'd be real nice if they could get McKinnon back because he could be another threat in the pass
game. They
game.
should have him back in the playoffs. I think they should have McKinnon back in the playoffs. With CEH, I mean, he's been a nice little change of pace. He was just sick. So he should be good to go, I would imagine, this weekend against the Chargers. And then, I'm okay with the Pacheco, Clyde Edwards-Helaire combination. And I think that CEH has had some kind of resurgence over the last several weeks or so. I don't know what his long-term future looks like in Kansas City, but
he's not nearly as good as Pacheco.
But I think
he's not nearly as good as Pacheco.
I think he's made himself attractive enough to be able to latch on potentially somewhere else after this season, right? Like, because there were I had questions at the start of the year about, is this guy can he even find his way on an NFL roster? After he's done in Kansas City, I think he's done enough to show that.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he's got a nice skill set. He's just not explosive at all. But he has done a nice job filling it. And what he can do for the Chiefs, I think, is allow them to continue to do what they need to do. He can grind it out enough where they can, just even if it's a 3-yard gain, which is like his expertise. They just have to have the run game free up the passing game. You have to make defenses respect that run game to help those wide receivers. And I think they're doing that. And Clyde Edwards-Helaire can at least do that. And Isaiah Pacheco's a weapon, right? When he's out there, he's a weapon. He makes big plays. He made 3 or 4 of them in the game. Like, he's a totally different animal when they have him out there. Put him on ice. Don't play him. Let him just sit on ice. And if you can get to the point where he can carry the ball 15 to 20 times closer to the 20, then I think the Chiefs are going to have a pretty good path. They just have to figure out, how do we not make any mistakes? And that's going to be difficult because the offensive line has struggled a little bit, and we've seen that disrupt a lot of things they're trying to do. And the receivers are very prone to making mistakes that can really cost them. So it's like everything we've known about Kansas City being ultra aggressive has to go away, right? You got to put that away. You don't need to be aggressive on 4th down. You don't need field position matters. Harrison Butker matters, right? 6 of 6. He's been incredible this year. I mean, if not for Aubrey in Dallas, Butker would be all anybody in the kicking world. I don't know how big that world is, but it would be all about Butker this year. So if you can just play to your strengths, right? Play to your defense, play to the fact that's how in a lot of years, that's how Baltimore's won games. Now, they've become more explosive offensively, but there are teams in this league that have won tons of games playing great defense, being really good in special teams, and having a disruptive pass rush. The Chiefs have all of those things. And then they still have Patrick Mahomes, right, and Kelce. And so they also still, with all of that, have this, you want the ball in this guy's hands before anybody else. They really do have a path. Now, they have to execute it almost flawlessly because they can't make up for it if they make mistakes. But their best game is good enough to win a Super Bowl. They haven't had that a lot. I get that part of it, that's asking a lot because we haven't seen that a lot. But I do think we are starting to see at least the formula, the game plan that could take them to that place. And they're not just being stubborn and trying to cram that square peg into a round hole anymore. And that has me a little more optimistic.
And that was really important in the week leading up to this game. All of the reports about the Chiefs trying to simplify the playbook a little bit, and all of this analysis of receivers having issues and substitutions and getting on and off the field and figuring out the motion and where everybody was going, and all of that. It almost seemed to me like they all had a little bit of brain fog. Like, hey, there's just so much going on in this offense, and we don't know what we're doing. And that's kind of embarrassing when you're on the big stage. They tried to simplify things. I noticed that first offensive drive that Kansas City had, where it was sharp and it was effective and it wasn't complicated, it wasn't confusing. There weren't a lot of trick plays and misdirection and things like that. It was just a simply put, really effective offensive drive for Kansas City. They marched down the field. They got into the end zone. They scored a touchdown. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe things are starting to work a little bit more. They've simplified things down. They're keeping it simple. Things are working for them, and they're utilizing their talent to the best ability that they can. Then you have the strip sack on Mahomes and then a short field for the Bengals, and they score. Then they get up by 10. But then really they let the defense take over at that point, and it was Harrison Butker. It was getting in field position and kicking field goals. And then the defense was absolutely stifling after that point. They got to Jake Browning a lot. I think that I don't know if there is a better defensive coordinator in the NFL at dialing up blitzes at the right time than Steve Spagnuolo. Right. He is a master at that. They were getting to Browning multiple times in the game. I thought L'Jarius Sneed did a phenomenal job on Jamar Chase. I think Chase finished with like 4 catches and 40 yards or something like that. It was a pretty quiet game for Jamar Chase for the most part. I thought they did a really great job. I mean, because keep in mind, after the Bengals went up 17-7, the Chiefs shut them out the rest of the way and let the offense get into field position, kicking field goals with Butker and all of that. And that was the recipe for success for Kansas City. So, I think that
scored 1 touchdown.
That's all they needed, right?
6 field goals.
That's all they needed.
That works. Yeah, it worked. And Chase was hurt too. So that was a factor in the game. That's why I don't want to get too excited because, Chase was hurt. Higgins got hurt in the game. Like the Bengals, they had a deck stacked against them. But I agree. You just have to take things back, dial it back, and be defensive in the way that you play the game. And I do start to get the sense, don't you, that like they're embracing it a little bit. Not just the coaches. I think the coaches are clearly embracing it. I kind of think the players are embracing it a little bit too. I get the sense that they're on board with this and they can see that this is the path. And yes, drop passes are still just maddening and all of these things. Here's the other thing that we can discuss, and we'll ask Dan this. What do you do if you're Andy Reid now? Because you can play for the 2 seed here. Miami lost.
No, you're locked
Miami
in.
Has to play.
You're only locked into the 3 seed. You can't go any higher than that.
Why? If they have the same record with Miami, they have the head-to-head win.
I'm pretty sure I read that they are locked into the 3 seed regardless of what happens.
Oh, they're 10-6. We'll have to look that up. They're 10-6. Miami's 11-5. If Miami loses and Kansas City wins, and Kansas City has the head-to-head win with the same record, I think they'd get the 2 seed.
I'm 99% sure they're locked into the 3 seed.
Okay, we'll check on that
because that's why there's this conversation about resting players because they're locked into the 3 seed regardless.
Yeah, we'll check it. It's fine. There must be another tiebreaker in there. So we'll get to all of these things with Dan. I don't know what team you want to play the least in the AFC as you open up, whether it's Buffalo or Miami, Cleveland. I don't want to play any of them. I mean, Miami of those 3 is probably who I would take preference with the injuries they're dealing with. Jacksonville, of course, you'd love to play Jacksonville. And then the 7 seed. I mean, I don't know. Like who if it's Indianapolis, that's fine. But if it's Houston or Pittsburgh, like those teams are kind of dangerous too. This AFC, there's not really you're going to have to just like for the Chiefs, they have to do their thing. They have to do their thing. And that thing can beat anybody. But if they wander from that too much, I think they're capable of beating anybody. I also think they're probably capable of losing to anybody. And that's going to make their postseason really, really interesting. I don't know what will happen, but I know they've got a chance. And at times this year, I think maybe we thought they didn't. So we'll come back. When we come back, let's talk about KU Wichita State because we'll get back to the Chiefs with Dan Israel at the top of the hour. So we'll do that. We're going to check on this seeding thing, make sure we get that right for you and get you updated there. I thought they could. Maybe they can't. Maybe there's another tiebreaker I'm missing out on because that's just me looking at the standings. That's not reading anything. So we'll come back. We'll check on that. We'll get a little Shocker Jayhawk talk, and then we'll get to Dan Israel top of the next hour. It's Sports Daily on Tuesday. All right, welcome back, everybody. Okay, figured it out. Here's what I was overlooking. Chiefs are locked into the 3 because if Buffalo beats Miami, they'll jump Kansas City into that 2 for winning the division, and they've got the head-to-head win, of course, over Kansas City. So that's where that is. So Kansas City's the 3. That's why we're having the debate about starting or not starting players. I would probably guess that Andy Reid will play his guys for just a little bit, sort of like a preseason game. He typically is more aggressive than some coaches. I don't think he wants to sit his guys, but he's also really good after a bye week. So maybe he would sit him. And he sat Alex Smith for Patrick Mahomes whenever that was Mahomes' real rookie year. So I suppose we could see him sit. I probably wouldn't play many of them. I don't know who I would play. I'd play the receivers. I'd play Marquez Valdez-Scantling and say, go catch the dang ball. I would put him out there and say, go target him 13 times and just keep peppering him with targets, and let's see if we can't snap him out of it here. That's what I would do.
Let him be the only wide receiver out on the field. Put him out there, put a couple backup tight ends, just call it good. I do think that they'll probably start the regular starters. That'd be my guess. Travis Kelce, I think, is only 16 yards away from 1,000 receiving yards in the regular season, which would continue that streak on. So I wouldn't be surprised. I know he needs rest, but it wouldn't be surprising if they start him, try to get that 1,000-yard mark, and then sit him for the rest of the game. That wouldn't be shocking to me if that happened. I don't know. I think that we know what Andy Reid's strategy typically is when it comes to resting players. You mentioned the Alex Smith situation. I bet we see them play for maybe a quarter, and then kind of go from there. I can't imagine that by the time the game ends, we're going to see many starters in the game.
Yeah, I just don't know. And honestly, I think at that point, you have to have conversations with your players. Like, it's not like they're dealing with a bunch of rookies. I think Andy Reid can have a genuine conversation and say, hey, do you want to play? Like, do you think is this good for you to play? Like, we trust you. We do all these things. You can't ever, like, again, I say this all the time about the preseason. Like, it's trying to prevent injuries in the NFL is like a fool's errand. It's football. It's impossible to do. Guys get hurt all the time. All right, let's quickly, Tommy, talk about Shockers KU as they both finish up their regular seasons. K-State will do that, or sorry, not regular seasons, but pre-conference, non-conference seasons. And we'll get KU and Wichita State doing that later this week. K-State does that tonight, by the way, a game you'll hear right here on KFH. But the Shockers go into Kansas City. I was concerned about this game. I think stylistically is a really bad matchup for Wichita State. Thought that all the way through, and it turned out to be that way. Body language. I was at the game. Body language, they were fine. Like I didn't get the impression they gave up or did anything like that. I think it's just a bad matchup. They're similar in some senses in what they need to do, and of course, KU's one of the most talented teams in the country. I think they're just more talented and they do some of the same things, and it began to just play itself out that way.
I think you could tell the talent gap. It doesn't mean that Wichita State is a bad basketball team. I wouldn't be I wouldn't be discouraged if I was a Shockers fan after that game. Just because you're playing one of the top teams in America, and just the talent level of guys like Hunter Dickinson and Kevin McCullough and what they're able to do is just so much different than the guys that are on the court for Wichita State. So it was a bad matchup all the way together. I do think that Wichita State hung around for a while. Midway through the first half, they were in the game. And then
more to KU not doing what it needed to do, though.
And really, I think the biggest concern for Wichita State is just the lack of shooting, right? And not being able to have shots.
That's why it was a bad matchup. If KU loses games this year, it's going to be because they play a really good shooting team that shoots the ball well. That's what's going. KU's not going to lose games where teams are trying to create offense down low, which is what Wichita State needs to do to some degree, right? Like, somebody's going to have to shoot to beat KU. That's why I didn't like Wichita State. That's what I was with a group of Shocker and KU fans, and everybody's. It's like Wichita State doesn't shoot well, and the KU should be fine here because KU's problem is they can't shoot well. KU does everything else really well, though. Like, that's what they do. And so when they came out early and we're settling for like 14-foot jumpers and all this, I'm like, what are they doing? Like, their only priority in this game right now would be, if I'm Bill Self, and I think he agreed, and I think you began to see this, would be to get the Wichita State bigs into foul trouble. Like, get those two tall towers off the floor and just work your way down. And they eventually got there, and it just I'm with you. I wouldn't be discouraged either if I'm a Shockers fan. I think it is a nice thing to have happen right before you now go into the conference season because, outside of FAU potentially, and I'm not even sure FAU's as talented as KU. They may be as good, but they're not as talented. You're not going to see anything like that now the rest of the way. Now it's more like, okay, can we go be the best of our tier? And eventually I think the Shockers want to be in a different tier, but that's not the reality right now. And this will be a really nice test for them, I think, this year in this conference.
And I think Paul Mills is a really talented head coach. And I bet he'll use that. I bet he'll say, guys, look, we lost by 20 points to KU. We're not going to play another team as talented as KU the rest of the way. FAU is a great team, but they're not even as talented as KU is. So you got that out of the way. You played them. Now let's go play teams in our own conference. We can compete with anybody in the American. Let's go and get it done as we get underway in conference play.
They get the national window to open up the conference season. It's an 8:00 game, so it's a late tip because of that. That'll be Thursday against North Texas. That one should be a lot of fun. Looking forward to that game. That's one of the teams I think they'll want to be competing with in the, maybe the 3 spot, if that's the goal now, is like a best case scenario in the conference. So that'll be a fun game. I'm excited to see it. That one is on Thursday. All right. Let's take a break. We'll come back. Dan Israel's going to jump in, the executive producer of the Chiefs Radio Network. We'll see what he thinks, if he has any insight on who's playing. We'll see what he thinks about our theory that is a path for the Chiefs to win playoff games. I think he'll agree because we talked about it last week being what they need to do. It's exactly what they did. How sustainable is it? We'll talk to Dan right after this.
Touchdown! Kansas City!
Hey, Chiefs Kingdom, we have you covered. Joining Sports Daily Live, executive producer of the Chiefs Radio Network, Dan Israel.
And welcome back in, everybody. Our visit with Dan Israel, Chiefs executive producer, Chiefs Radio Network. For the first time in 2024, Dan, Happy New Year. I'll ask you what I asked Tommy. Did you have your black-eyed peas yesterday?
I did not. It's a good question.
Well, I hope everything goes well this year for you either way. For the Chiefs, it was New Year's Eve Sunday, right, when they played? Yeah. So they get to start fresh in the new year maybe, but we got the formula. We talked about this last week, Dan. Run the ball, set up, play action to get wide receivers wide open. Sometimes they won't catch it anyway, but at least you got them open, and play good defense. Harrison Butker's a weapon. That was, to some degree, that was the formula, right? If the Chiefs are going to win playoff games.
Yeah, pretty much. And I did think they did a good job of reducing the mistakes. However, at the same time, it's still there's still a few out there that they need to clean up, because I feel like you can't make a mistake in the playoffs, or it can unravel your run there. And so, but it was good to see him clean it up. It was depressing to see MVS drop balls, but I thought we saw something exciting out of Richie James. That was good. I thought that Rashee Rice continued to look good. Still a little puzzled by Kelsey's lack of performance. I don't know if it's just purely because teams are saying, look, you're gonna beat us. You're gonna beat us without Travis Kelce. But for Kelsey to only have 16 yards seemed a little strange to me. But all in all, good performance. It's a win, and they clinched an 8th straight division title, which, frankly, guys, I think is amazing. I mean, 8 straight division titles. I think in my first 25 years of broadcasting the Chiefs, they maybe had 4 or 5 division titles total. To do 8 straight is pretty phenomenal.
Dan, I was really impressed with the first offensive drive for Kansas City, where they marched down the field. It was pretty effective, pretty efficient. And I know that there was a lot of talk earlier last week before the game about how the Chiefs were really trying to work on simplifying the playbook, figuring out exactly the best plays that were going to put their players in the best position possible. And I know after that first drive, they weren't able to get into the end zone again. But how much of that narrative of them simplifying the playbook do you think led to the success that they had on Sunday?
Yeah, I couldn't get anybody to actually admit to that to me, but I think it was evident that was part of the plan, and I think it worked. I think it was significant. I also think there was definitely a tone of accountability in the locker room for the week of practice or leading up to that game that I can't say that I've seen. There was a seriousness and I don't know why it took this long. You could ask that question. I can't answer it, but it seems like that should have started about 6 weeks ago, if you ask me. But it was quieter. It was a little more serious, a little more intense, and so I think that had a factor in it as well. But whatever those ingredients are, that's the recipe we need. That's all there is to it, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's there. But what do you just run Watson out instead of Valdez-Scantling? Like, I don't know what they're supposed to do when they have a guy open on a play like that. I mean, Mahomes has to still throw the ball to that receiver, doesn't he? Like, you can't take that element away completely. It's almost just like drop it and don't, bat it up into the air and cause an interception like that. But you have to still take that shot, I would imagine, when it's designed up and it goes the way it's supposed to.
Yeah, there's a progression of reads, right, that the quarterback goes through, and those long routes are typically early in the progression. And so if a receiver has beaten his man early in the game, you're throwing that ball to him. That's all there is to it. The lack of confidence there for Mahomes, look, nothing's said to me, but I think human nature tells us all the lack of confidence he must have in that particular scenario has got to be really high. I mean, I just can't imagine that he feels good when he throws that ball. He must see like, okay, he's really beating his guy. I guess I'll give it a shot. This is kind of like what I said with when we played the Raiders a couple of weeks ago on Christmas, why we were dropping into coverage, because when the quarterback threw the ball, there was only a 50% chance he was going to get it to his receiver. He was overthrowing guys by 15, 20 yards, underthrowing guys by 10 yards. It's like, that's a 50-50 ball. You got to get it to a receiver before he can catch it. Well, that isn't the case with Mahomes. The case with Mahomes is the other end, right? I throw it right to the guy. There's a 50-50 chance he's going to hang on to it. And I know that the long ball that was going down towards the west end zone Sunday to MVS, that was a little bit of a tougher catch, but it still hit him in the hands. And, there's a piece of me that just, I guess I've grown intolerant to watching that. I do think, guys, and this is something I think, you could say, you can make an argument, I guess, should the Chiefs play for the number 2 seed or just be comfortable at 3 and rest guys so that they don't get hurt. But I do think they need to continue to kind of refine what they're doing and find a plan that works, that they can execute at a high level. And I think part of that is going to be Mecole Hardman. I think Mecole Hardman being on the field, having the speed of an MVS without having to rely on MVS, I think changes things. I think having the speed of both MVS and Mecole Hardman on the field is really impressive. But I mean, I just don't know how much guys are covering MVS at this point when he's not effective.
Yeah, I don't really mean to pile on the guy because I know that, there's been a lot of that over the entire season, basically, with MVS. But where do the Chiefs go with him? I mean, I'm not even talking about just in the next week. I'm talking about in a playoff run. I'm talking about in the offseason. With the amount of money that he's guaranteed and the contract that he has. In your mind, what do you think the Chiefs do with a guy like him that really, he's the highest paid receiver they have, but he's probably the most ineffective?
Yeah, I think, let me break that question apart. So if we say, what's going forward in the playoff run, I think there's a inscrutable memory photograph in our coaches of last year's championship game and that catch and him sending us to a Super Bowl. And I think so to a large degree, they're like, it's there, he's going to get his one big play. He's going to be there when it counts, kind of like Frank Clark was in the playoffs, where it was a different Frank Clark. Playoff Frank Clark and regular season Frank Clark were two different people. And so I think there's this element of he's going to do something big again in the playoffs like he did last year. And I'm all for that. Let's have it. I think to the second part of your question, what do they do in the offseason? I don't see how you go forward with this guy. I don't trust him. I don't think they trust him. I don't think the players trust him or the coaches trust him at this point. There's just too much baggage here. And I think, I said when we played Green Bay, you could almost sense this subconsciousness of the Green Bay fans going, see, told you so. And I don't know. It's hard to disagree with that when you see a guy like Aaron Rodgers and a guy like Patrick Mahomes, and neither one can make this guy into Justin Jefferson. That tells you something. So I think in the offseason they have to part ways, regardless of what the dead cap money is. Regardless, you got to get somebody in there. And I think this is part of the Chris Jones argument too. When you're talking about being a number 2 or 3 defense, you're talking about George Karlaftis having more sacks than Chris Jones. I don't see how you can afford to pay Chris Jones. You've got to go out. You probably got to get some offensive line. You probably got to get some. You have to get some receivers here that are studs.
Dan Israel, executive producer of the Chiefs Radio Network. When we look at the landscape of the AFC and I guess the NFL as a whole, and we see Baltimore flex again, is the Chiefs, with the formula we're seeing, is the Chiefs best good enough to go on the road to Baltimore and win that game? I think it is, but I think they've got to be near flawless offensively as far as making mistakes. They can't do that, but I do still think there is a path for them if they can play the best version of the game we saw on Sunday.
Yeah, I agree there. That's the prescription, right? You have to play legitimate Chiefs football, not what we've kind of been doing on and off all year. but that old school, what we've seen out of Mahomes and Kelsey and Reed the past, 6-7 seasons. I think it's interesting. I would tell you, when I look at Baltimore the last couple of weeks, they look pretty tough, man. They look complete. They look balanced. They look like they're executing at a high level. I've said for a long time that I thought if they could ever get Lamar Jackson to play in the pocket as a legitimate quarterback and then use his legs when they have to, that they would be a dangerous team. And they are. They look like that now. However, they haven't looked like that all season long. It's not like they've got it's not like they're undefeated. And so I agree. If the Chiefs can play Chiefs football, they can go up to M&T Bank Stadium and they can at least make a contest of it. Will it be a blowout? No, I don't think it'll be a blowout either way. I think it'll be the last man standing. But I'd love to see that, in a season that's had as much, I don't even know how to quite to describe it, with the level of parity where there's so many teams sitting at 8 and 7 and kind of vying for these last few playoff spots. It's crazy how much the parity is come into play this season. For a season like that, to say, hey, look, you're not going to play the AFC Championship in Arrowhead this year. All right, let's do what the Patriots did then. Let's go on the road and go win it, right? And I think the Chiefs can do that. They have the talent to do that, but they have to execute. You're exactly right. They have to execute at a near perfect level if they're going to beat what looks like a team executing their game plan at a perfect level, right?
So here's another off-season question for you, Dan, and it's based off of something I thought about while watching the game on Sunday. I want to talk about L'Jarius Sneed. I had this thought, and I think a lot of people have thought this also, that more than likely the Chiefs would let him test free agency when that contract is up at the end of the season. But after watching him on Sunday and then basically throughout the entire season, I feel like you got to try to make a run at re-signing him. Do you think that's something that the Chiefs will entertain? I know he's going to probably garner a pretty big paycheck, and I know money is tight, with Kansas City and all of that. But do you envision a scenario where they do make it at least a legitimate attempt to keep him in Kansas City?
Yeah, Tommy, I actually think they have to. I think they need to. Those guys don't grow on trees.
Yeah.
The Dale Carters and the Darrelle Revises of the world, they don't grow on trees. And if you've got one, and I think if you look at the body of work between he and McDuffie this year, the number of outstanding receivers that they've defended well. Look what they did to Jamar Chase. 3 catches.
Yeah.
Jamar should have been forced to do a press conference Sunday and apologize. Is what it is just I just think they have to make a run. And this again goes back to the Chris Jones. This is why I think you can't afford the Chris Jones re-signing unless Chris makes a team-friendly deal, which, frankly, what we saw out of last year, I don't think that's ever going to happen. So I just think you can't spend all that money on one guy because you got to pay the Sneeds. You've got to go out and get receivers. And I really do think not only will they try to sign Sneed, they should try to sign Sneed. I think he's been that good, and I think he's been a critical part of why this defense is so outstanding. Teams just can't. Sunday's performance in the fourth quarter was suffocating.
Yeah.
I just felt like, man, I get this is a backup quarterback. This isn't a guy who's used to all that pressure. But when you take away his targets and you just leave him out there for the Lions, for the D line to just go and devour, it's pretty impressive defense. So I think, to your point, not only will they, I think they should, and I think they're going to try to figure out. That'll probably be the first thing they deal with in the offseason, to be honest with you, is figure out where we're talking. And by the way, I would say this too: probably the happiest guy in the National Football League right now is Sneed's agent, because he has played at a level. If you said, hey, demo me how good this guy is. All right, well, let's give you Justin Jefferson. Let's give you Devontae.
Yeah.
Let's give you the number one receivers in the league. And he's done it all, man. So his agent's got to be just licking his chops.
Yeah, you add the way that the secondary is played and then the pass rush and all of that. And that kind of leads me to another question. is there a better defensive coordinator at dialing up blitzes at the right time than Steve Spagnuolo? I mean, you mentioned the fourth quarter and how suffocating it was. I mean, they were getting to Jake Browning like crazy in that game on Sunday. And I just feel like the timing that Spags has when he sends the blitz versus when he doesn't, I mean, I feel like it always works out in the way that it should.
Yeah, and the fact that it works out in his favor so much more, it's like flipping a coin and it coming up heads 9 times.
Yeah.
Well, that's not normal. That isn't natural. Something's affecting that coin, right? So I do feel like he's special in that. Look, there's a lot of good defensive coordinators. Nobody would question Bill Belichick's defensive prowess, but I just feel like, in particular, Steve Spagnuolo is exactly what this team needs. And it's interesting to me, one of my guys on Sunday was saying, oh, no, they were scored. Here they go. Here we go. This is going to be one of those games. I'm like, dude, just calm down. This is the way they work. The first quarter is like this assessment. All right, how are you going to play? And then the remaining 3 quarters is this clamp down defense. The first 3 possessions last Sunday, the Bengals scored 17 points. The remaining 7 possessions, they scored nothing, not even field goals. And so to me, I feel like that defense, he is just so good at kind of designing, like adjusting in game. So that first quarter, that second quarter sometimes is like an assessment. He's taking stock in what he's got and what he needs to do. And then the third quarter, man, he just dials in the adjustments and it becomes dominating. And it's fun to watch. I really enjoy defensive football. I know that the offensive football is exciting to watch and, fun. And I loved scoring, 14 points in 2 minutes in the old days. I like that too. But this defense has been just a really entertaining group to watch, I think, in playing some of good teams too. They've shut down some of the NFL's best this year.
I don't want to look ahead before it's over. How much of this defense can be held together next season, Dan?
That's an excellent question, Jacob. Money's the issue in all teams. Some teams tend to do better with it than others. I think the Chiefs are among some of the teams that have done better. I mean, to be able to have a huge contract with Mahomes and Kelsey, and I get that those guys both did team-friendly deals and stuff, but it is the great divide, and I don't see a way to keep Chris Jones and keep this team moving forward. If we keep Chris Jones, I think you're hamstrung with exactly what happened this year, which is you can't go out and get the DeAndre Hopkins. If you keep Chris Jones, do you have a shot at T. Higgins? I don't think so. Do you have a shot at Mike Evans? I don't think so. And I think if you don't have him, then you do. So the question, I guess, becomes really, what's that defense look like without Chris Jones? Well, I'm sure it's not going to be as good. Chris Jones is a monster.
Right.
Chris Jones is also 34 or 5 years old now. No, I don't think he's that old, is he? He's maybe 30 or 31. But my point is, I guess, that Chris Jones is on the top to decline side, not ascending side of his career. And so do you drop from the number 2 or 3 defense to the number 5 or 6 defense? Yeah, you probably, but that's still pretty good. So I guess if they could keep the bulk of it together in terms of the secondary, if they can keep Snead, I think we could do. I think George Karlaftis has been playing really, really well. I think he's going to continue to play better, get better, and play stronger. And so, that takes a little of the pressure off those interior guys, right? But they'll have to do something. It'll be a little bit different, as it is every year, right?
Yeah, it is. It is. Chris Jones, 29. He'll turn 30 this summer, and yeah, he's signaled that he wants to be paid. So I think you have to put that in your back pocket. There's no Kelsey or Mahomes deal coming for him unless something changes drastically from this past offseason. Dan, we appreciate it. I don't know who you're going to get out there on the field this weekend, but the Chiefs are in. Their spot is secured, and we'll see what happens. And now the question all week will be how much do guys play. But you guys will have the call this weekend one way or the other.
We will. I think the Chargers are going to be in a weird spot. The Chiefs are in a weird spot. You're exactly right. I don't know what we'll see, but one thing I think is for sure is if they can continue to prep for the playoffs. That's what's important.
Yep, I agree. Dan Israel, executive producer, Kansas City Chiefs Radio Network. We appreciate it, Dan. The next time we talk, we'll be getting ready for a playoff game.
That's right. Have a good week, guys. Go Chiefs.
There goes Dan. That's crazy to think about, Tommy. This time next week, it's like we're going to be breaking down a playoff matchup. Let's talk about the Chris Jones situation in the offseason. And it only seems topical right now because Jamar Chase keeps bringing up L'Jarius Sneed and that he's the only guy, and he's going to let's hit that just a minute here when we come back. We'll have more Sports Daily. Welcome to 2024, everybody. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back, everybody. Sports Daily here. First one of 2024. An interesting point came up in the conversation with Dan Israel, which you can go back and listen to the Chiefs Radio Network executive producer for free on the Odyssey app. An interesting part of that, though, I thought, Tommy, was Chris Jones. And what do you do next year? Because you can't keep all these guys together. They have some big defensive free agents. Chris Jones, by the way, is having another Chris Jones season, right? He's got 9.5 sacks. I don't think he'll play in this finale, but he's been getting a lot of pressures. His impact on the field is immense. You can see it every game. It's interesting because, you know, they made the decision essentially to go with Jones over a free agent receiver. If we want to, and it's probably more complicated than that, but if we want to look at it that simply, and it's led to having the best, you know, the second best defense, I suppose, in football this year. I don't know that that was the wrong decision. Now, they've had to learn how to win games in a different way. If they had a different number one wide receiver, how many of these outcomes go different? I don't know that. But it's not like it was a bad decision to go with Chris Jones. But if you go back to the decision-making process, we pointed this out all along. If you decide to go this way, it will cost you in other places. And they did, and it has. But here they are, and they do have a path. So it's interesting to try and guess at what comes next, because it's not like it's been a bad decision to keep Chris Jones. It's just, you know, the ramifications of it are very clear to us.
Yeah, my opinion on this, I think, has shifted as the year has gone on. Before the year started, I was definitely on team pay Chris Jones whatever he wants and lock him in and keep him in Kansas City. I've kind of changed on that and cooled off on that a little bit. And it's not because Chris Jones has done a bad job. It's because there have been other places in that defense that have stepped up big time. And I think it's incredibly essential now at this point moving forward to take care of those guys because they are so important in other areas on the defense. L'Jarius Sneed is a perfect example of that. Dan and I talked about that, you know, about how the way that he has been placed on number one receivers throughout the entire season, and for the most part, locked them down week in and week out. You know, he's going to be a free agent. He's going to garner a good amount of money on the free agent market. I agree with Dan when Dan says that not only should the Chiefs go after him, but they will go after him. And I think that they try to lock him in and re-sign him. You're going to need that money coming from somewhere. And I don't think that it's going to be the best idea at this point to throw a bunch of money at Chris Jones going into his year 30 season, as opposed to trying to re-sign guys like L'Jarius Sneed.
It's always been length of contract with Chris Jones for me. I don't know that there will be any, even L'Jarius Sneed. Like, L'Jarius Sneed is more replaceable than Chris Jones. And I think L'Jarius Sneed's been awesome. But what Chris Jones does in a game is pretty irreplaceable. Like, there's two of them that do it at that, you know, he and Aaron Donald. And then there's other great defensive tackles, don't get me wrong. But, I mean, these guys are absolute game wreckers on almost every play. It's the age and the length of the contract. I don't know what the best answer is. And I'm not sure you would convince me that having a great receiver is more important than having Chris Jones. I don't think I agree with that. And in fact, I think you could take a couple of dart throws at veteran wide receivers and have a better luck. It really comes down to like Sneed, and is it Willie Gay's the other big free agent? Like, it really comes down to that. And I just wonder, and I think I know the answer to this, by the way. I think I know the answer is that they'll move on from Chris Jones and attack some offense. And I think it's because Kelsey is getting a little older, And if Kelsey, could you imagine if Kelsey regresses or anything like that? Like, again, and we've gone through this exercise, literally every tight end of all time has. Kelsey's actually done it better than all of them still. Like, he's still aging at a slower rate than tight ends historically ever have. But it's coming, right? It's coming. We can see that it's coming. And so I think that's probably the reason they attack that way, is because they have to have a backup plan. The Chiefs don't always get it right in the offseason, but I think that their philosophies are generally the right ones. What they attack. They attacked offensive line after the Super Bowl loss. They attacked defense after it wasn't good enough for so many years. Like, they do attack the areas of need. Again, they don't always get the player right. But I don't know how you attack wide receiver, because I don't think they can. I don't, even if they don't have Chris Jones, I'm still not sure they can go afford to sign T. Higgins. Like, I don't know that that's going to be what they're able to do either. Maybe it is. Maybe, and at that point, you can just sign up and say, okay, there's your receiver, Mahomes, on to the next one. Because you do have that in Rashee Rice.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
can
You
you
have that
imagine
receiver in Rashee Rice.
a duo of T. Higgins and Rashee Rice? I mean, that's going to be, if that happens, that would be incredible. And oh, by the way, Travis Kelce there at tight end. You mentioned L'Jarius Sneed and how, that you think he's replaceable. Find me another.
I don't think he's replaceable. I think he's more replaceable than Chris Jones.
Find me another corner, though, in the NFL that has been locked down on Justin Jefferson, A.J. Brown.
He's been awesome.
Tyreek Hill, awesome. Most recently Jamar Chase last week, and has shut them down consistently every single time that he's been put on the number one receiver. I'm not sure there's another corner in the league that has been able to do that at that level this season.
That's not what I mean. What I mean is there are more typically good corners like that than there are absolute game-wrecking interior linemen who would both do it against the run and the pass. I'm not saying L'Jarius Sneed has been in the conversation for the best in the business this year. That's not what I mean at all. What I mean is his position, generally speaking, you can find guys to move into those spots. You don't replace Chris Jones. Like, there is no replacement for Chris Jones. And so I don't know. And I think they'll let him go. I think they'd invest in Sneed there, I think. But if they invest in Sneed, are they going to, after the season he's had, are they going to be able to attack receiver? That's the other thing. Like, everyone just assumes if they don't sign Chris Jones, they still have to sign L'Jarius Sneed to way more money than he's making right now. So that's going to also take up a lot of money. They have big decisions to make. Basically, do you continue to invest in the defense, or do you switch it back up and go back to the offense again? And I don't know what the right answer to that is. I really don't. I cannot believe, and I was the biggest advocate for adding a wide receiver to this room. And even I can't believe it's gone this poorly, right? I thought they needed one so badly in the offseason. I wanted them drafting one in the first round, like all of these things. And I can't believe it's gone this badly.
I mean, I'm not even looking for a wide receiver that, is a game record, number one type. All I'm looking for, and I'm not even looking for multiple of them, I'm looking for somebody that is not a reclamation project, somebody that's just not a project in general. I mean, outside of the guys that they've drafted, you've got Richie James, who has had some flashes, and he's been good in the return game, but he's kind of a project. Kadarius Toney is clearly a project. Justin Ross has been a project. Sky Moore has been a project. There have been so many different projects that they've gotten at wide receiver that they don't have anybody that you really feel confident in week in and week out. And so I'm just looking for, if they go attack the receiver in the offseason, just bring in somebody that's a little bit more proven, somebody that you can trust in a little. They don't even have to be. I mean, I would love T. Higgins. Don't get me wrong. That'd be incredible. But it doesn't even have to be a guy the caliber of T. Higgins. It can be somebody maybe even a tier down that at least you can trust in some capacity when the ball is thrown to them.
I agree. I don't think it needs to be T. Higgins at all.
I think it'd be great. That'd be incredible.
I think they have that with Rashee Rice, though. And I don't think it needs to be Mike Evans. Like, there will be other guys around that could, I think, be like Kendrick Bourne is going to be a free agent, I think. Can you get Kendrick Bourne? Can you get, Hollywood Brown's going to be a free agent. What does he command on the open market? How about Noah Brown and what we've seen out of him in Houston, right? Like there's going to be some guys
Calvin
on that
Ridley
list.
is a free agent after this season.
I
Darnell
think
Mooney
Calvin
is a
Ridley-
free agent after this season.
Yep. And I would still like, even stylistically, what do they need? Like, I that's the thing. I don't think they have to go I'd rather see, let me give you an example. I'd rather see L'Jarius Sneed and Kendrick Bourne than I'd rather see T. Higgins or Mike Evans or probably Calvin. I bet Calvin Ridley gets paid. But like that, you know what I mean? Like, I'd rather see a combination of Sneed and a middle tier receiver, because I think Rashee Rice is a top end guy. I think he's going to continue to develop into that. And so I don't think they need that. I think they need reliability, just guys that can catch the ball. Because if Kelsey still has 1 or 2 good years in him, and I think he probably does, you're looking for a third option in the passing game. That's all you're looking for. And I think you can go find that. What about a guy like Sterling Shepard, who's had some injury issues, but he's been good when he's on the field? Like there are some names out there that I think they can take swings on that will upgrade the wide receiver room, that won't potentially cost them. I just don't think you can.
I think
Sneed and Jones and Gay, like
right.
you can't watch all those guys walk out the door.
I think KJ Osborne is a good receiver for the Vikings.
Fine.
I think he gets overlooked in a room with Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. But I think he's a good wide receiver. He's a free agent this season. I mean,
Gabe Davis is a free agent.
And you know what? I think and there are a couple of current Chiefs wide receivers that are free agents. I don't think they re-sign McCole Hardman. They might
re-sign any of them.
They might re-sign Richie James. He's a free agent because what he can do in the return game. But I mean, that's basically it. I think they're going to let the rest of them walk. And there are a lot of other really good options that are out there that probably aren't going to cost you a whole lot of money.
How much would you like to see Demarcus Robinson back on this team?
Oh man,
this year after what he's doing in LA right now?
I mean, he immediately slots into probably your number 2 wide receiver. Like
he for sure does. There is no question. He for sure does. And it's just, they just missed. They just missed on at the position. And now they're going to have another off season where it's like, what do you attack here? I still think you do as much as you can to keep the defense together and take more dart throws at wide receiver. You could try drafting another one if you want to. I just don't want to ruin what they put together defensively, because I do think great defenses still matter so much in the NFL. And I just don't know, without Travis Kelce, let me ask you this. Are we ever going to see the Chiefs offense be what it was when it had, the 2 Hall of Fame pass catchers on it? I don't think it'll ever get back to that ever again. The Hill, Kelce offenses. So if it doesn't, what is it like, and what would you rather see? I still think that, putting Mahomes with a great defense is not a bad idea. You just have to get more production, and like any production out of these guys. And they've tried a million different ways and it hasn't worked. So I don't know. I just don't think it's like everyone wants it to get back to this Mahomes throwing 50 touchdowns a year kind of thing. I just don't know that that's going to happen. That was a perfect planetary alignment when that was going.
I think it can, but I think it's going to depend upon the way that they prioritize things in the future. And what people conveniently forget is that, like, that season or the couple seasons when the offense was clicking, you remember back, and I think it was the 2018 or maybe 2019 season, when the offense was breaking records left and right, and it was just insane how bad their defense was.
Yeah.
Right? Like, they were scoring 50 points and it wasn't enough. Like, I remember the Monday Night Football game against the Rams and Jared Goff, and it didn't matter what Mahomes did. The Rams were scoring, immediately on the Chiefs defense, and how awful they were. So it's really, really, really hard to put it all together at one time. The priority over the last couple of years has been defense. That's really where it's been for Kansas City. And so because of that, you put all the focus and a lot of the money on the defense, then there are some things offensively that maybe start to fall through the cracks and you're not really performing at that high level. So it just comes down to what they prioritize moving forward. And I think that they've leaned on the talent of Mahomes. They've leaned on the talent of Travis Kelce. And they've said, you know what, we can kind of piecemeal the rest of it together. That we're kind of seeing how that works now. And that's kind of where we're at right now. So, I mean, do they go back and they prioritize the offense more in this offseason? I think probably a little bit. I think you have to blow up the wide receiver room outside of Rashee Rice, start from scratch, and then just kind of see what you can do on the free agent market and in the draft. And I think that even if you can go out and get a mid-tier receiver in the offseason that's a free agent and you use a high draft pick on a wide receiver, I think at that point, your wide receiver room is immediately better than what it is right now. So I don't think it's going to be that difficult for them to at least get back to a competent, normal offense next season, but it's going to take some work for them to do that, I think, this offseason.
So Willie Gay is going to be a free agent. L'Jarius Sneed, of course, is going to be a free agent. Drew Tranquil is going to be a free agent. Mike Edwards is going to be a free agent. I mean, there's a chance their defense is not even close to what it is this year. I don't know what – we're obviously going to have a long time to think about the way to attack, and they probably have some idea now. But it will be fascinating this offseason to see how this plays out. I just don't see Chris Jones back, but, man, he's still so good. And that'll be tough to see him playing in another uniform, but it's probably inevitable. This, it's the price of success in the NFL. All right, we'll come back. Let's give away some HTO on the way out here, Jad. We'll do a couple of free Brewhouse coffee offerings. That's iced or hot. The weather has turned. Might be a good opportunity to get a little of that coffee. You can do that right now by calling us on the KFH hotline, 869-1240. Those cards good for 2 free Brewhouse drinks at either the East location of HTO in Wichita or the Derby location. We'll be back with more Sports Daily right after this.
97.5 and 1240 KFH.
Truck owners, Toppers Plus Truck Accessories has a new expanded showroom at 333 North West Street, stocked with the tonneau cover for you. Protect your truck bed and valuables with a locking truck lid. Choose from hard, soft, folding, or retractable covers. Toppers Plus has top brands including Lear, Undercover, Backflip, X-Stang, Roll and Lock, and more. Work or play, make your truck work for you. Visit our new expanded showroom at 333 North West Street or toppersplusks.com.
Make your truck work for you!
Save time, trouble, and frustration when you call Mr. Electric. Mr. Electric provides expert receptacle repair, ceiling fan installation, kitchen lighting, electrical panel upgrades, home surge protection, and more. Experience unmatched professional service and safety with upfront pricing, call-ahead scheduling, and 24/7 emergency electrical services. Save the headache with Mr. Electric. Residential or commercial, Mr. Electric has the power to make things better. Call now, 316-361-5200, online at MrElectricWichita.com.
How much money in taxes will you owe when you retire? If you don't know, that's okay. Let us help you. Market Tax Services has created retirementtax.com just for you. This brand new website is user-friendly and features accessible information and a helpful tool, the Retirement Tax Calculator. Click on the button and find out how much you're set to owe in less time than it took me to read this script. Again, that's retirementtax.com. Your home for taxes in retirement.
Come and enjoy a free birthday boil at Hook and Reel. Valid only with minimum of a 2-entree purchase, proof of ID, and also valid 3 days before and 3 days after birthday. Located in Town East Parking Lot, East Kellogg.
Denise has been playing jazz for 40 years. Last concert, one of the musicians fell sick with RSV. Respiratory syncytial virus, or RSV, is a highly contagious virus that can lead to breathing problems. This time, she's choosing to help protect herself with Pfizer's RSV vaccine, Abrysvo. Abrysvo is a vaccine for the prevention of lower respiratory tract disease caused by respiratory syncytial virus, RSV, in adults 60 years of age and older. Abrysvo is not for everyone and may not protect all who receive the vaccine. Don't get Abrysvo if you've had a severe allergic reaction to its ingredients. People with a weakened immune system may have a decreased response to Abrysvo. The most common side effects are tiredness, headache, pain at the injection site, and muscle pain. Ask your pharmacist or doctor about Pfizer's RSV vaccine, Abrysvo, respiratory syncytial virus vaccine. For full prescribing information, please call 1-844-989-7284 or visit abrysvo.com. Brought to you by Pfizer.
Patterson Legal is the way to go. Call 550-0000.
Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan.
Hey guys, did you know there's a generic form of Viagra that works just the same, but is 95% cheaper? And you can get it online? Just go to hims.com/joy. Through Hims, you'll get a free medical consultation, discreet shipping if prescribed, a 100% online process, and trusted generic alternatives to the name brands at up to 95% off. That's right. Get generic for Viagra, the same active ingredient as brand name Viagra, but for 95% less. It's the same medication, still prescribed by a licensed medical provider, but with zero copay, no expensive appointments, and no awkward face-to-face conversations. To start your free online visit, you need to go to this exclusive address, hims.com/joy. That's hims.com/joy for your free online visit. HIMS.com/JOY.
Ladies and gentlemen, Bob and Tom.
A man brought home a snake from a hike that he thought wasn't dangerous, but it was, and now he's in the hospital. What you failed to mention, worst thing I ever brought home from a hike was poison ivy on my groin.
Ooh. What were you doing up there?
Right there on
peeing on a tree.
Let him do his own thing.
Yeah.
In his own time. That's right.
And that's why I'm no longer allowed at parks.
Bob and Tom mornings and highlights replayed all day long.
Bob and Tom mornings. This is 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
Hey, Philly fan, help me out here. What is the opposite of climbing a greased light pole? Because whatever the opposite of a Philly celebration is exactly what's going down there right now. This Eagles team looked broken and miserable and dysfunctional on both sides of the ball. Philly fan, I would never tell you what to do or what to think, but if I were you, I would find a panic button and jump up and down on that thing. Because clearly this crew is panicking and in desperation mode.
Jim Rome, middays from 11 until 2 on 97.5 and 1240 KFH. Wichita's most listened to sports radio.
It's time to get back to the sports talk.
All right, let's do this thing. Go!
Sports Daily is on KFH.
All right, Wildcat fans, you can check out GoPowerCat.com's PowerCat podcast, the latest bowl and transfer portal news, as well as men's and women's basketball all season long. Follow PowerCat Podcast on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. You can hear K-State basketball, 6 o'clock, Chicago State on KFH. I don't know. I mean, there's not really anything we need to see. It feels like K-State hadn't played in like a decade basketball, Tommy. But we got one more to go here for the Cats on the court before they get into Big 12 play. Anything you're still curious about or needing to see out of the regular season with Chicago State tonight?
Just a good tune-up for them. I don't know anything about Chicago State, kind of like you. But it's the final non-conference game before you kick off Big 12 play, so you want to make sure that you're getting everything in that you want to see.
December 21st.
It's been a long time. Was it the Wichita State
Shocker game?
Yeah, that was the last game they played.
That was the last one they played.
So, you've got one more tune-up, and it's a long layover, right, from December 21st to now. So you want to try to shake the rust off as best as you can. Get ready to go for Big 12 play because you have this long layoff. You play one more non-conference game, and then it's right into Big 12 play, and it's a grind. We all know. Once you get into conference play, it is a lot. And you very often have games on a Saturday. Then you might have another game on a Monday or a Tuesday. So really not a whole lot of time off in between games. It's a grind. And Big 12 play is a marathon. So try to shake off that rust, get tuned up, get ready to go with this final non-conference game.
I suppose it is good timing, right? When you don't play a game for that long, to be able to come back and get one out of the way before you then jump in, because they go Saturday. So this will be a well-placed game. It's odd that they don't play, earlier in the, it's like because let me look at KU's schedule here real quick, because KU opens the conference season with a game on on Thursday. No, it's Saturday too. Okay,
Everybody
so they
kicks
also
off
open
on
up.
Saturday.
So
yeah.
everybody, I was Wichita State plays Thursday. I was thinking KU did too. So that's good. So, for KU, their tune-up essentially was Wichita State. And now the tune-up because they hadn't played since the 22nd before. It's a shorter gap, but it's still a gap. So we'll see what they can do against Chicago State. I'm not too concerned that it's that level of opponent this late in it. I think it's better for KU to have been able to play Wichita State, but K-State just played Wichita State too. So we'll see. I'm just ready for Big 12 play. I mean, all of this being said, can we get to conference, please? For both the Shockers and KU and K-State. I don't know what to expect out of the Big 12 this year. I think it's going to be wild, probably more so than ever before with the new teams. It's going to be awesome. I'm going to love it. And I feel the same way about the American for the Shockers. I don't know what to expect outside of FAU and Memphis. I really don't. And we say that all the time, but I don't know how you could. Where are I haven't even looked at the KenPom in a little while, but let's just take a quick look here. So you got FAU in the American right now sitting at 21. Then you have Memphis at 34. Then you have SMU at 50. North Texas at 82, Tulane at 114, then Wichita State at 120, and then a bunch of other teams sort of between 120 and 200. So North Texas right now, who's 7-5, is better than Wichita State by a pretty significant margin in the KenPom. So that is a good way to start it. And then they'll get Temple, looks like, according to KenPom, is the cupcake of the conference right now. But that North Texas game, that's a good one. Those are the kinds of teams Wichita State needs to be better than this year, in my opinion.
Yeah, and Memphis, I know they're high up in the KenPom. The one thing we know about Memphis over the years is that, they've got a ton of talent, but they don't always execute at the top of their game, right? So, I think clearly FAU is number one. We all know that. But then beyond that, I think that Memphis, while they may have the talent to be the number 2 team in the American, I'm not convinced that they actually are. I think you're looking at SMU. You're looking at a grouping of teams with them in North Texas, Tulane, maybe Wichita State in there as well. And really Florida Atlantic, we know how experienced they are. We know how talented they are, how well coached they are, all of that. They made an incredible run last season. They've backed it up for the most part. I know they lost. They were upset just a few days ago. But other than that, they are an incredibly talented team, but there's really nothing that backs me off of my thought that Wichita State can't be one of the 3 or 4 best teams in the American this season.
I agree. Big 12, by the way, Tommy, 10 teams inside the top 40, 10 teams. And I didn't even realize until right this second that BYU has played their way up to number 3 in the KenPom. I had no idea that was happening. So good for them. I had legitimately no idea that BYU was playing that well and off to that good a start this season.
Of course,
wow.
Of course, we keep our eyes on Houston for sure, but keep your eyes on BYU. Keep your eyes on Oklahoma. They're a team that in the non-conference has looked incredible. They found their way into, I think, a top 20 ranking nationally.
Cincinnati's really good. There's 10 inside the top 40 of the KenPom. That is insanity. Oh, it's going to be so fun. It is going to be so much fun. Kansas State's not one of those 10, by the way. Kansas State's down there at 67. So they're the next team after that. But Kansas State right now is going to have to prove something, right? They're going to have to get in there and mix it up with teams right now that, through the metrics and all that, have looked better so far. Whew, we get that game tonight. All right, we'll come back. We'll tell you what else is on the network today when we return on Sports Daily. All right, that does it for us, everybody. Congratulations, Alex, for winning the HTO. We'll have more prizes to give away here in the year 2024. Looking forward to it. We mentioned it, K-State basketball on KFH tonight at 6 o'clock. You've got Jim Rome, Bob and Jeff locally, Zach Gelb, and a little JR Sport Brief before that. So busy day on the network. Looking forward to K-State tonight. We'll be back to talk about it tomorrow. Happy New Year, everybody. For Jad and Tommy, I'm Jacob. We'll see you then.